When it comes to brutal torture, there are a few methods of torture that have caused more pain than you could imagine. The first one was the brazen bull. It's said to be invented by the Greeks around 500 BC. A person was forced to enter a hollow metal bull. A fire would be lit under the bull. The temperature rose slowly, and the person inside got roasted to death. Another one is the Judas cradle, invented by the Spanish in the 16th century, where a person was forcefully made to sit on a triangle-like structure, and the pointed end of the triangle was inserted into their vagina or anus. This slowly tore the person apart, thanks to their own weight. These torture techniques were invented and used many centuries ago, but what about torture in recent times? Has anything really changed in the human story? This one torture technique was used as recently as 70 years ago, but hasn't been spoken about much. The scariest way to lose your mind and then your life is the supposed Russian sleep experiment. Welcome to a new series on BeerBiceps, where we dive deep into the horrors inflicted by humans on each other and find out exactly how far would human beings go before they stopped. In 1894, a Russian scientist named Marie de Manassine started experimenting with what would happen if the basic necessities of life were taken away from human beings. She began this experiment on 10 puppies, taking away their sleep. She wanted to know the reactions that happen inside the brain while they're sleep deprived. What happened was not what she expected. All the puppies died due to a lack of sleep. In the journal Origins of Neuroscience, she recalls her experiment. I found that by experimenting on 10 puppies, that the complete deprivation of sleep for 4 or 5 days, that's 96 to 120 hours, causes irreparable lesions in the organism. And in spite of every care, these experiments could not be saved. The complete absence of sleep during this period is fatal to puppies, in spite of the food taken during this time. The experiment, the worst form of torture, the Russian sleep experiment that was so horrible that most people don't even think it was true. What was it? This is the truth about the Russian sleep experiment. Post-World War II, Russian researchers thought they found a way to keep their soldiers awake for 30 days at a stretch. They thought that if there was ever another war, their soldiers will have the upper hand and fight without getting tired for days at a stretch. But they wouldn't do this experiment for the first time on their own soldiers. So they brought in 5 prisoners of war. In exchange for letting them go, those prisoners were to stay awake for 30 days. A small price for their freedom, right? So they locked the prisoners in a chamber where an experimental gas-based stimulant was constantly pumping. They kept them in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. The chamber was stocked with books, running water, toilets, toiletries, and enough dried food to last all of them for over a month. Every necessity and comfort these prisoners could ask for, barring one: a bed to sleep on. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. On day 1, it was seen that they behaved just as normal people do. Approaching day 5, it was noted that the prisoners started talking about darker things, their traumatic experiences, their PTSD, their post-traumatic stress disorder, how they left their families during the war and never got a chance to see them again, how they saw their friends die in front of their eyes and how they could do nothing about it, leaving them there and moving forward, how the prisoners of war in their country were tortured to death, how children were tortured in front of them. This marked the start of an even darker turn. After the 5th day, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were and started to demonstrate severe paranoia.
Are they going to kill us? Are they going to torture us to death?
Such paranoia started creeping into their minds. Little did the prisoners know that it wasn't just them being paranoid, but it was actually what was happening with them. Suddenly, they stopped talking to each other and began whispering alternatively to the microphones and started talking to their own reflections in the mirror. They all seemed to think that they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning against the other subjects who were with them. Instead of thinking of themselves as part of a collective, they started looking at each other as some sort of rivals. At first, the researchers thought that this was an effect of the gas itself and refused to open the chamber or let them out. But things like this went on for a few more days until on the 9th day, one of them started screaming. He repeatedly yelled at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. After that, he attempted to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. As the researchers found, he had physically damaged his vocal cords to a point that he couldn't even speak. The most surprising thing about this behavior was that there was no reaction from the other captives. The same people who shared their life stories with him a few days ago didn't even care, didn't even react to something so horrific. Almost like they couldn't care less about each other. They continued whispering to the microphones until another one started to scream. One more down. The same happened with him. Even though he saw another man losing his voice just some time ago, he continued to do the same and lost his voice in the same way. The 2 non-screaming captives tore the books apart and smeared each of the books page by page with their own feces and pasted these pages calmly over the glass in front of them. But then the screaming suddenly stopped, and so did the whispering on the microphones. 3 days passed. No voice, no whispers. So the researchers checked the oxygen levels in the room. The amount of oxygen consumed in those last 3 days was similar to what 5 people would consume under heavy, stressful exercise. But the captives weren't exercising. So on the morning of the 14th day, the researchers finally did something to get a reaction from the captives.
We're opening the chamber to test the microphone. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom.
To their surprise, they heard a single phrase in a calm voice.
We no longer want to be free.
These men, they'd given up on the idea of freedom itself. A debate broke out among the researchers and the military personnel that were present. Unable to provoke any responses using the intercom, it was finally decided that they'll open the door on the midnight of the 15th day. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air. But 3 of those 5 prisoners started begging to turn the toxic gas back on. They were addicted to this gas, and it was driving them insane. The chamber was opened and soldiers were sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever. And so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects was still alive. The food rations past day 5 had not even been touched. But the most horrific part was that there were chunks of meat from the dead test subjects' thighs and chest stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber. The meat blocked the drain, and 4 inches of water accumulated on the floor. All 4 surviving test subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. A closer examination of the wounds indicated that all the wounds were self-inflicted. They'd torn their own flesh off their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on the fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand. The abdominal organs below the ribcage of all 4 test subjects had been removed. The heart, the lungs, the diaphragm remained in place, but the skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off. Their lungs were exposed through the ribcage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just been taken out and they were lying on the floor, fanning around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects. Some of them even proceeded to eat their own flesh so that they could feel something. Soldiers and scientists were afraid to go in, fearing for their own lives. But when the researchers finally got some soldiers to remove the subjects from the chamber, to everyone's surprise, the subjects put up a fierce fight, as if they suddenly had some sort of superpowers. After a struggle, the researchers and soldiers finally had the test subjects removed from the chamber. All the test subjects eventually died from either the medical procedures post the research or after being unable to be controlled by the military itself. They were killed. The details of this experiment were released in 2009, and people lost their minds about it. Most people don't believe it to be true, even till today, because of such graphic details and such biologically impossible aspects of the experiment. Is this experiment a little too extreme for a human being to perform on another human being? Humans are capable of things that are this bad. Be it the Holocaust, be it the experiments performed by the Japanese on the Chinese prisoners of war during World War II. The 1930s, 40s and 50s were an extremely dark time. And even though the details were released on the internet in 2009, nobody will ever know the complete truth about the Russian sleep experiment. This brutal mindset could very well be a reason that Russia was on the victorious side during World War II. But if this rumored to be true Russian sleep experiment had actually happened, at what cost were these kind of experiments really carried out? Russia lost more than 2.5 crore people in the war, but it didn't matter to them because they just had victory in their minds. Nobody knows for sure if the Russian sleep experiment actually happened, but if it did, it goes to show how fucked up human minds can really be. Not caring about their own people, forcing soldiers to go out and die, not caring about other humans as families, making POWs their slaves, and then treating them as lab rats. It's said that the Russians even encouraged scientists to conduct brutal experiments on innocent civilians. But as we know, winners write history books. And in truth, we'll never really know about the true atrocities of the wars that human history has witnessed. What we're taught in history books is simply a winner's perspective of the story, and definitely not the entire story. History only tells us about the things that make the winners look powerful, the winners look good, and the winners look heroic. What does heroic mean anyway? Some people insist that these experiments were fictional, because maybe they just don't want the truth released. But many believe that the true atrocities of World War II are known by only a few.